you think is the most important thing we need to know about serotonin?
Okay, now you want to break everything down into sort of one simple sentence so you can repeat it to yourself into oblivion. And then you could get everything else from there. So with serotonin, it's mood, but you want to dig a little deeper and say it's perception of availability of resources. Okay, so that affects your mood. Now, in lower organisms, you're talking about, and this is details under what I just said. I'm going to repeat what I said again because sometimes I shoot through stuff. So, perception of availability of resources. Okay, now in lower animals, you're just talking food. In social animals, you're talking about mood, about social rank, social dominance. Because
like status in social people, status is a resource, right?
Yeah. It gives you access to food, access to honeys, access to comfort, and the things to signal, and therefore mood. Yeah.
Okay, so wait, I gotta stop you. I'm sorry, but I think you said to try to get it in a sentence. Perception of availability of resources.
Yes.
How does a neuromodulator, how does a chemical compound in your brain create the perception of your resources?
Okay, let's break it into, let's go with the so-called pathological element. And I say so-called because a lot of times I don't like to box people as pathologies because they're humans. But so if someone is depressed, they have what's called mood congruent thinking. Your brain controls the way that the energy, which is your mind is the energy pathways, in your brain, in social media, whatever. Your attention to specific energy means that I walk into a room and I attend to certain things. Now, the best way I like to think about it is some people tell you that when they're depressed, it's like they have sort of a gray film over their eyes. Everything looks less vibrant. The signals they get, they hyper notice the shortage of social attention. They notice, and they become really self-referential. They feel as if everything they do is wrong. They get self-conscious. And the reason for that is if you imagine that we had a tribe and we had a shortage of food, then A, the least worthy amongst us is going to get left out. We eat from the top down, trickle down economics in the animal species, so if you perceive yourself to be low status, you become withdrawn, and your GI tract actually is another part that is serotonin controlled, so you get that upset stomach, I'm going to be hungry, so that's one way. Because perception is attention based, and attention controls the direction in which you allocate your energy, your awareness. You walk into a room and you're going to be noticing the people, and then another element, and I hope this doesn't muddy the waters too much, is there are two ways of being. There is state-based mindsets, and then there's action-based mindsets, event process-based. Now, when you become depressed and self-conscious, suddenly the way your brain is firing, you're thinking about, I'm not good enough, the situation is awful. You get these abstract, you get these generalizations, you overgeneralize. You're not as crisp, you're not, you get delayed response to stuff just because you're kind of saving energy because you're perceiving yourself as on the way to death and you don't want to annoy anyone to accelerate the process.
Right.
Whereas in an action-based mindset, you're goal-directed. You see a situation and you tend to focus on the situation, the relationships within the situation, and what your next possible steps are, which makes for a more active, engaged, interactive person.
So the key to me, though, man, you're doing great.
Cool.
The reason I asked the question initially is I think most people probably limit their thinking around the word perception to the senses. I perceive a noise, I perceive a smell, I perceive a taste, I perceive a sight, But what you're talking about is, well, yes, but thinking itself is an act of perception, right? Like you have to perceive your own thoughts and what you attend to in terms of your thinking.
Yeah.
And in doing so, you're firing off these processes, right? You're firing off.
You're interpreting, you're inferring. Now, you want me to go there because I mean you're
I don't want you to
you're tickling my geek spot, you know.
Rehash and connect, you know.
Oh no, I can rehash.
Okay.
So perception and cognition aren't really different. They're along a continuum of what we call inference. Okay, and when we say inference, we mean swap, 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 swap. You know, and by swap I mean firing of things that say you are here. Now, when you're somewhere and you're looking around, some people, and these are what we call the sensing types, they look around and they see car, 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 car. Okay? Now, when you deal with intuitive types, and this is Myers-Briggs typing because it's simple enough to make the point, a person who's more intuitive type looks at the same area and he's like, I've noticed that the cars are triangulated. They notice the relationship between things. They notice processes. Now, when you're dealing with motivation, which is what serotonin really is about, you can be either in approach or avoid phase. You're either about to work on something or you're about to back away from the situation because it's not working out for you. You're about to get exiled anyway. You might as well start getting used to being part of the outgroup. So when you're in approach motivation, you see similarities between things. You see connections. You see relationships. When you're in avoid group, you're sort of defending yourself. You start kind of defining things as, well, I don't really need that anyway. You know, you're sort of preparing yourself for things to go badly. And so these are two different ways of making inferences. And the way people make inferences in the real world is through interpreting. In my real world, I say subjectively, the way you feel is how you interpret a metaphor. Optimism versus pessimism. Yeah. So the glass is half full. Yeah, but I'm worried that I'm perceiving that it's half empty, and I realize that there's a lot of people ahead of me. So I'm feeling pessimistic. So that's a simplification of it, hopefully. Okay. It's the perception, the lens that you put on the perception of availability of resources.
Cool. Well, let me pull up this. So there are pathways in the brain. And this is the same graphic we used in the last episode, but we were focused on the blue pathways, which were the dopamine pathways. Yep. And now talk to us now about these red pathways, which are the serotonin pathways.
Yeah, the key thing you want to know about the serotonin pathways, it's created in the raphe nucleus. That's about it.
Which is that sort of central oval shaped, yeah, right in this.
Right in the lower part. Yeah.
Now, interesting to me, I tend to be a little bit more literal, so if you give me a picture, I start to analyze the picture.
Go for it, yeah.
You know, so almost a whole looped pathway here going to a lot more of the brain, it seems like to me, than the dopamine pathways.
Yeah, because it affects your perception, and in your somatosensory cortex, that's where stuff fires off based on salience, based on how much you see of something there. Yeah. So if you watch the pathway, and you know you're gonna make me go there, if you look at the pathway there on your cortex, and if everyone should remember the cortex is like the bark of a tree. If you look at the pathway there, you'll see that you have your somatosensory and your premotor cortex. If you get a shortage of serotonin, you end up where things aren't as salient, you know, and the logic behind that is you're motivated by the salience of something, but when you get a depressed person, they get what's called slowing, where I can't think of the exact word right now, but they move less quickly, they respond less quickly, they're harder to motivate, because even if you show them a pretty picture, they'll tell you it sort of has a gray to it, which is indicated by, if you look at the top along the arch there, that it's not firing off as much. Now, another thing this diagram kind of shows, and this is kind of going deeper into the pool, is that there's sort of a relationship between dopamine and serotonin, like where they wrestle a bit. You know, they kind of counterbalance each other, and you see that happening sort of in the frontal cortex there.
Because if serotonin is largely connected to mood, then how my mood affects my sense of reward is going to affect how I learn, right?
Yeah, because if I'm feeling like A, I'm low status, B, nothing has really worked out that well for me in the past, I'm less likely to be jumping at opportunities, you know? less likely to be reward-driven, because reward-driven behavior is action state behavior, whereas like not the state-based behavior is how I'm feeling, versus like how I feel about myself, how I feel about the situation, sort of a fixed way of being, not thinking so much about anticipation, about outcomes, but just kind of things are as they are, and they'll be like this forever. It's sort of a serotonin deficient way of thinking.
Okay. So in the future, you guys, what we'll be doing, what we'll be striving to do more and more, is we're trying to lay this foundation of parts of the brain, neuromodulators, and processes in the brain, how they all come together. And then over the long haul, hopefully, as you guys follow us and you engage with us more, and we talk about behaviors and choices and how we can create a life in which you really thrive, this is the stuff that we hope to keep coming back to over and over again, and tell you how once you know this, you can take advantage of it and learn how to fire this stuff off, and not just have it going on in your brain without you knowing about it, but be able to do something about it. So
simply being able to visualize this stuff empowers you. Like this, it's like visualization of neurofeedback.
Yeah. Cool.